Before we start, let me ask you something, brother. Have you ever noticed how certain dating conversations feel completely rigged before they even begin? Like, no matter what you say, you're already cast as the villain. This is one of those conversations, and that's exactly why we're having it. Welcome back to the channel. This is The Relationship Mind, a place where we talk man to man about relationships, self respect, and how to move through the modern world with clarity instead of confusion. No theory for theory's sake, no feel good lies, just practical psychology you can actually use in real life. Now, what you're about to hear isn't something you'll see discussed honestly anywhere else. Because the moment someone brings it up, emotions flare, labels get thrown, and the truth gets buried. So let's do this cleanly, calmly, like adults. A few weeks ago, I received an email from a viewer. I won't read it word for word, but I'll tell you the story because it perfectly captures what so many men experience, but never feel allowed to say out loud. The email started like this: Harold, I don't hate single mothers. I tried to be the guy everyone says men should be, and I walked away feeling like something was deeply wrong with me. I need to understand why. He was 35, solid career, no kids, never married, met a woman through mutual friends. She had two kids, 8 and 11, different fathers. He went in with the best intentions. He told himself, be open minded, be mature, don't judge. He didn't want to be that guy. 4 months in, something started to feel off. Not dramatic, not explosive, just heavy, like he was carrying weight that didn't belong to him, and no one acknowledged it. Here's the part nobody wants to talk about. When men evaluate a relationship, they're not running a moral checklist. They're not asking, is she a good person? That matters, but it's not the first filter. The first filter is much more primitive, much quieter, and much more ruthless. It's an internal cost benefit analysis, and it happens fast. Sometimes in minutes, sometimes before the first date is even over. On one side of the equation is what a man brings: time, energy, attention, emotional bandwidth, money, future planning. On the other side is what the relationship gives back, not in fantasy. In reality, and with single mothers, that equation starts off imbalanced from day one. Let me be very clear before anyone twists this. This is not about worth. This is not about whether single mothers are good women. Many are strong, resilient, and loving. This is about structure, dynamics, and outcomes. When a man dates a woman without children, every unit of his investment goes toward building something shared. Every dinner, every trip, every late night conversation, it all compounds toward us, toward a future that belongs to both people. When a man dates a single mother, a significant portion of that investment is immediately diverted. Not maybe, not later. Immediately toward children that are not his, toward a life system he did not create, toward priorities where he will never be first. The guy who emailed me said something that stuck. He wrote, I felt like I was donating parts of my life instead of building one. Plans revolved around school schedules, dates depended on babysitters, conversations were constantly interrupted. He understood it intellectually. Of course, the kids come first, he respected that. But emotionally, something kept grinding him down. He told me about one Friday night. He'd made reservations, showered, changed, even felt excited, which he admitted was rare for him. 30 minutes before he was about to leave, she texted, one of the kids wasn't feeling well. Babysitter canceled. Rain check. He replied with understanding, of course he did. What else could he do? But he sat on the edge of his bed afterward, dressed up with nowhere to go, and felt something die a little. Not anger, not resentment yet, just enthusiasm quietly leaking out. And this is where men get confused because no one event feels like a deal breaker. It's the accumulation, the pattern, the realization that this is not a temporary phase. This is the relationship. Another thing he mentioned, almost as an aside, was the father's phone calls, drop offs, group texts, scheduling negotiations. He said, I knew logically they'd always be around. I just didn't realize how small that would make me feel. Because here's the brutal truth, brother. When kids are involved, the ex is never really an ex. He's a permanent stakeholder. And the new guy, he's entering a system where all the major roles are already cast. That's when the resentment started to scare him. Not because he hated her, but because he didn't like who he was becoming. quiet, self censoring, always accommodating, always understanding, always second. And the worst part, he felt guilty for even noticing it, like wanting to matter was somehow selfish. That's the reality no one prepares men for. Not the shouting matches, not the stereotypes, but the slow realization that you're pouring full commitment into a situation that can never fully choose you back. Now, here's the question we'll answer next. If this imbalance is so obvious once you see it, why do so many men still try? And why does the tension never resolve no matter how good the intentions are? We'll break that down because this isn't about blaming anyone. It's about understanding the mechanics before you volunteer your life into them. Before we move on, drop a comment with one word that fits this part: imbalance or clarity. And if this conversation already feels like something you've lived, consider subscribing and joining a growing community of men who value self respect, honesty, and real world growth over empty approval. Here's the part most men don't expect, brother. They think the discomfort will fade. They assume once everyone settles in, once routines stabilize, once feelings deepen, the tension will resolve itself. It doesn't, it hardens. Let me go back to that email because the next section hit harder than the first. The guy wrote, I understood the rules. I just didn't understand the cost of following them. From day one, any man dating a single mother knows, at least intellectually, that he will never be first priority. The kids come first, always. That's not up for debate. And most men nod along to that idea. They say the right things. They tell themselves it's noble, mature, the mark of a real man. But here's where psychology doesn't care about good intentions. Men are wired to want to be chosen. Not occasionally, not conditionally, fully to be the primary emotional partner in a woman's life. That desire isn't social conditioning. It's biological and psychological. And when it's chronically unmet, something breaks internally. The viewer described it as living with a constant low-grade tension. Not dramatic enough to justify leaving, not small enough to ignore, just always there. He said date nights felt like borrowed time, like everything existed on contingency. If the kids were okay, if the ex didn't change plans, if work didn't run late, if someone didn't get sick, nothing was ever solid, nothing was ever sacred. He remembered trying to plan a weekend getaway, nothing extravagant. A short drive, one night away. It took 3 weeks of coordination, checking custody schedules, negotiating swaps, confirming childcare. And when it finally seemed locked in, the ex changed his mind. The trip evaporated. She apologized. She was frustrated too, and that's important. This isn't about villainizing her. She was doing the best she could inside a system she didn't fully control. But that didn't change the outcome. The plan died. Again and slowly, the man stopped planning things. Not consciously, he just stopped imagining, because imagining had become a setup for disappointment. This is the psychological tax men pay in these relationships. They're expected to bring boyfriend-level commitment into a situation where they receive part-time access, partial availability, fragmented attention, and they're told they should be grateful for it. Another line from the email stuck with me. He said, I felt like I was living family life without family status. Think about that. Responsibilities without authority, commitment without priority, investment without security. And then there's the ex, the one everyone pretends isn't a factor. He's always a factor. Pickups, drop-offs, phone calls, texts at inconvenient hours, decisions made together, history you'll never be part of, inside jokes you don't understand, shared memories that predate you and outweigh you. One man I worked with, different story, similar pattern, told me about sitting on the couch with his girlfriend when her phone rang. It was her ex. She answered immediately. He muted the TV, sat quietly, listened to her coordinate plans for the kids for 20 minutes. When she hung up, she smiled and said, Sorry about that. He nodded, but inside something clicked. He realized if he ever needed her urgently, he'd still be behind that man. Not emotionally, structurally. And that's the part men struggle to articulate. You're not competing for affection. You're competing against obligation, and obligation always wins. The email writer put it bluntly. I wasn't building a relationship with her. I was joining an existing system where I was optional. That's the eternal triangle. Her, the kids, the father. No matter how absent or unreliable he is, his position is locked in. Yours isn't. You can do everything right and still be replaceable. And men feel that deeply, even when they don't say it. Then comes the accumulation of baggage, not just emotional baggage. Everyone has that, but operational baggage, financial strain, child related expenses that never end, braces, sports fees, school supplies, emergencies. And while no one explicitly asks you to pay, the expectation floats in the air. If you care, you help. If you don't help, you're selfish. Logistics become your invisible enemy. Schedules aren't flexible. They're dictated by custody agreements and school calendars. Want to see her more? That's when she has the kids. Want alone time? That's when she's exhausted. Emotionally, many single mothers are running on empty. That's not their fault. Parenting alone drains you, but it means the relationship often gets leftovers. And men notice when they're consistently receiving the version of a woman that's tired, stressed, and preoccupied. The email ended this section with a quiet line. I didn't leave because I stopped caring. I left because caring was costing me myself. That's the unresolved tension. You're told to accept permanent second place and call it maturity, but over time, it doesn't feel like growth. It feels like erosion. Next, we need to talk about the part people really don't want to touch: biology, time, and what men give up that they can never get back. Before we move on, drop a comment with one word that fits this part: second, or tension. And if this resonates more than you expected, you're not alone. There's a reason this conversation makes people uncomfortable, brother. Because once we move past feelings and intentions, we run into something that doesn't negotiate: biology, time, and irreversible trade offs. The man who emailed me said something most men won't admit, even to themselves. He wrote, I kept telling myself love would override everything, but my body didn't get the memo. Men are biologically wired to build, to invest, and to pass something forward that carries their name, their blood, their legacy. That isn't toxic masculinity. That isn't social conditioning. That's evolutionary reality. And you can intellectualize it all you want, but when a man ignores it long enough, it comes back as regret. When a man dates a single mother, especially one who already has multiple children, he's not just choosing a relationship. He's choosing a future with constraints baked in: constraints on time, on energy, on finances, and most critically, on his own opportunity to have biological children. This doesn't get talked about honestly. Men are often shamed for even thinking this way. They're told love should be enough, that wanting kids of their own is ego, that stepping into someone else's family is noble. But here's what actually happens. Another email came in a few months after the first one. Different man, early 40s. I'll call him Aaron. He'd been with a single mother of 3 for 4 years. He loved her. He cared deeply for the kids. He coached soccer, helped with homework, showed up, paid for things without being asked. Every year, he told himself, next year we'll talk about having one of our own. And every year, something got in the way. Money was tight. She was exhausted. The kids needed more. The timing wasn't right. At 41, he woke up one morning and realized something brutal. His window was closing, not metaphorically, biologically. His friends were having their first kids. He was raising someone else's. He told me, I didn't lose it all at once. I lost it slowly. And that made it harder to see. That's the trap. There's no single moment where you sign away your future. You just keep postponing it. And one day, the postponement becomes permanent. Men can love kids that aren't theirs. Absolutely. They can bond, they can care. But there is a primal part of the male brain that never fully relaxes when resources are being poured into another man's genetic line. That doesn't make men monsters. It makes them honest organisms. And when men want children of their own, dating a single mother often means compromise at best, sacrifice at worst, especially when she doesn't want more kids or physically can't or simply doesn't have the capacity. Now, layer this on top of the dating market reality. Men with options don't compare relationships emotionally first. They compare outcomes. A woman without children offers flexibility, availability, a clean slate, the ability to build something from the ground up together. A single mother offers a pre-built life that a man is expected to integrate into permanently with permanent complications. From a pure cost-benefit perspective, the single mother has to offer more value to offset those disadvantages: more emotional maturity, more peace, more appreciation, more alignment. And the uncomfortable truth is that many don't. Not because they're bad women, but because they're stretched thin and operating in survival mode. Then comes what I call the step parent trap. This is where men get absolutely crushed. You're expected to act like a parent, but reminded you're not one. You're expected to contribute financially, emotionally, logistically, but you have no authority, no legal rights, no protection if things end. I worked with a man, we'll call him Ethan, who lived this for 6 years. He entered his girlfriend's life when her kids were in middle school. He was consistent, reliable. He showed up to every game, paid for phones, clothes, activities, treated those kids like his own. Then the relationship collapsed. Not because of abuse, not because of neglect. She reconnected with her ex. It was for the kids. And overnight, Ethan was erased. No calls, no texts blocked. 6 years of emotional investment gone in a weekend. No legal standing, no closure. He told me, I lost a family that was never really mine. That's the step parent trap. All the emotional risk, none of the security. And even while the relationship exists, there's a respect deficit men feel from all sides. The kids test boundaries and remind you you're not dad. The ex doesn't take you seriously. Her family sees you as temporary, and sometimes deep down, you feel she doesn't fully respect you either, because if she did, would she expect you to accept permanent second place without question? Men don't leave these relationships because they're heartless. They leave because the math becomes undeniable. Before we move to the final part, sit with this to comment one word that fits this section. Legacy or trap, just one word. Here's where everything comes together, brother. Not in theory, not in ideology, but in lived reality. At some point, every man in this situation runs the full calculation. Not emotionally, practically. He adds it all up. What he's giving, what he's getting, what he's postponing, what he's quietly surrendering. And that's when the fog clears. The man from the original email wrote one final line that said, more than 1,000 comments ever could. He said, I didn't leave because I couldn't handle responsibility. I left because I finally realized responsibility without reciprocity is just self-betrayal. That's the part no one wants to acknowledge. Men don't wake up one day and decide to abandon a woman and her kids. What actually happens is much slower, much quieter. It starts with optimism. He tells himself this time is different, that he's mature enough now, grounded enough, strong enough to handle the complexity. She believes she's found one of the good ones, a man who sees past her circumstances, a man who won't judge her for her past. They both mean well, so he adapts. He accommodates. He reschedules. He waits. He absorbs disappointment without complaint. He puts his needs last and tells himself, this is what grown men do. 6 months in, the cracks appear. A year in, the resentment starts whispering. 2 years in, it's no longer a whisper. It's a question he can't silence anymore. When do I get to matter? He looks around. He sees his friends building families from scratch. He sees men being chosen first. He sees relationships where effort is matched, not rationed. And for the first time, he lets himself imagine a different life. Then comes the breaking moment. Sometimes it's small. Another canceled date. Another weekend lost to logistics. Another reminder that her ex will always outrank him. Sometimes it's big. Watching her choose everyone else again when he finally needed her. And in that moment, something fundamental shifts. He realizes he's been auditioning for a role in someone else's life instead of writing his own story. So he leaves. And here's where the narrative flips. From her perspective, it feels like betrayal. She tells her friends he wasn't strong enough, that he couldn't handle a real woman with responsibilities. Online, the story becomes about men who won't step up, men who are immature, men who are afraid. But that's not what happened. What happened is he stopped accepting a deal where he gives 100% and receives 30%. He stopped mistaking self-sacrifice for virtue. He chose self-respect over silent resentment. And this is where the dating market comes in. Whether people like it or not, a quality man in his 30s or 40s has options. Not unlimited options, but enough. And when he compares them honestly, the differences are stark. A woman without children offers flexibility, peace, a shared starting line. a future that can be built together. A single mother offers complexity, permanent obligations to another man, locked schedules, divided attention, financial strain, emotional exhaustion, and the expectation that he should be grateful for the opportunity. The single mother needs an extraordinary man to accept extraordinary constraints, but too often she's offering an average or below average deal and expecting above average men to take it. That's not cruelty, that's math. And the market doesn't respond to moral arguments, it responds to value propositions: supply and demand, risk versus reward. For generations, men were told they had to accept these deals, that being a provider meant swallowing dissatisfaction, that being a good man meant putting himself last indefinitely. Many did, and many paid for it with decades of quiet regret. What's changed is awareness. Men are finally asking the same question women have always been encouraged to ask: can I do better? Not just sexually, not just socially, but holistically, emotionally, strategically, long term. And when it comes to dating single mothers, the honest answer for many men is yes. Not because single mothers are bad people, not because they don't deserve love, but because the structure of the relationship asks men to accept permanent second place, invest in children who aren't theirs, navigate extrema forever, delay or abandon their own dreams, and accept the risk of losing everything they build with no protection. That's not a partnership, that's a liability. So most men opt out. They'd rather be alone than be someone's safety net. They'd rather wait than be someone's backup plan. They'd rather build something mutual than inherit something already broken. And that's not men failing to step up. That's men finally learning when to step back. If you're a man who's already lived through this marriage, divorce, blended families, being the stepfather, the provider, the one who stayed too long, I want to speak directly to you for a moment. What you went through wasn't pointless, but it only becomes useful if you're willing to pass the lesson forward. Right now, there are younger men listening to this who are standing exactly where you once stood: confused, second guessing themselves, feeling guilty for instincts they don't yet understand. They don't need theory. They don't need motivation quotes. They need truth from men who've already paid the price. So if you've learned something the hard way, something you wish someone had told you 10 or 20 years ago, share it in the comments. You don't need to write an essay. One honest paragraph is enough. One clear lesson can change another man's trajectory. This isn't about complaining. It's about responsibility, about making sure the cost you paid doesn't have to be paid again by someone else. And if conversations like this matter to you, subscribe and join a growing community of men who value self-respect, clarity, and long-term thinking over guilt and social pressure. This isn't a channel for outrage. It's a place for men who are done lying to themselves. If you're not sure how to start, just begin your comment with 3 words: what I learned.